In this tutorial, actually in these next several videos, it'll probably be 2 or 3, I'm not sure. But in these next few videos, let's learn about Unreal's sequencer tool. Sequencer is a tool that is traditionally used to make cutscenes. And I have one set up here. This will give us an idea of what we're aiming to accomplish. This cutscene is fairly nonsensical again. You guys have good ideas. Your cutscenes will make more sense, but let's just get an idea of what kind of thing we're going to make. So yeah, that was again a little nonsensical, but what we saw there was my character walked into a collision box. The camera was taken control of. The camera started animating. There was a couple of ducks that was playing a fire effect that was moving. We also had an explosion play and some sound effects playing. So in essence, we had a cutscene, a very nonsensical cutscene, but we had a cutscene. We also saw that when my player walked in there, we took control of their camera. Well, we made a new camera and we started displaying that camera instead of our player's camera. And after the cutscene finished, our player gained control again. So this is something that is very useful for our cutscenes for your project ones. This would be a great way to symbolize the end of your level. So you collect all the keys, walk into that end trigger box, and then we can like zoom the camera out, have the doors open, maybe fly the cameras to the door. We can do a bunch of things. Again, this should work with whatever your idea is, and this is just a way of making cutscenes. It gives us a way to make our game just a little bit better. So let's just start by taking a look at this. I'm going to make a new level, so we're not using this level anymore. This was just an example to show you what kind of thing we're going to be building up to, what all the features we're going to be building up to will be. And so I'm going to go back to my content, and I'm going to make a new level. So Control N, I make a new basic level. And the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to save it. I'm going to call this level Sequencer. Awesome, so there's my level. I'm also just going to give a material to our floor so it doesn't look just, checkered pattern. Let me give you this cut stone material. So now it has like a nice texture to it. And finally, I'm just going to make sure my game mode is set. It's currently not here, and my project settings don't have my game mode set. You guys probably have your game mode set in your project settings, so you don't need to do this. But let's just make sure it's our player that's going to be playing this level. Now, when I hit play and I wait a second, my UI shows up. I can jump. So this symbolizes that this is my player playing the level. Perfect. Now we need to actually go ahead and make a sequence or a sequencer object. To do that, I have this folder here called sequencers. This is where I had that test sequence that we saw earlier set up. I'm going to make another one. We right click and we find cinematics because a sequencer is a cutscene tool. So it's part of the cinematics toolkit. And there's something called level sequence. This is what I want to add. If we hover over it, we see the description is movie scene animation for actors. Actors are everything in our level. So this is a movie scene animation tool for everything in our level. Let's add it in there. I'm going to call this door opening sequence. Or I'm sorry, I'm going to call it sequence underscore door opening. There's our sequence. Make sure I right click and save it for now. And we double click it to open it. It opens up this new tool called Sequencer. And so before we start actually using this tool, let's just talk a little bit about it. What we see here is our timeline. So just like we saw with the blueprinting timeline, this is just time. It's showing it in seconds. So this is 0 seconds, half a second, 1 second. When you open Sequencer initially, it's going to show it to you in frames. So let me just show you how to change that. So when we start sequencer initially, it's going to show us like this. It's going to be 0 0.1, 0, 0015, 0030. So these are the frames that we're counting. Currently, we're at 30 frames a second. So it's going to be half a second, 1 second, 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds. Because every 30 frames, we know 1 second has passed. I don't like looking at it in frames. It's a little harder for my brain to read. So all we need to do to change it is we click on this little drop down where it says 30 FPS. Here we can change our frame rate for the actual sequence. I suggest leaving it at 30. If you want a very smooth animation, you can set it to 100. But this would also require you to animate a longer portion of time, animate things, add more keyframes. So 30 is just a good default for us to work with. Come down here where it says show time as. It should default to frames. Instead, I am just going to change it to seconds. And there, we saw, 15 frames is actually half a second, 30 frames is 1 second, but seconds are a little easier to deal with. We can change the start and end points of our animation using these little green and red arrows. Unlike our timeline, for some reason, the sequencer lets us go into negative time. I don't quite use negative time for anything, so I always just start my animation at 0, but it's good to know that sequencers for some reason let us go negative in time. And currently we can see our sequencer goes from 0 seconds all the way to 5 seconds. If I want to increase the time of my animation, I can come down here to this rightmost number where it says 5.5, hovering over it, it says working range end. We can just click on it, and instead of 5.5 seconds, I can make it 10 seconds. Now, it doesn't change anything here yet. Instead, next to that, right next to it, there's another 5.5, and this is the view range time. So this represents the actual working time, how long the animation is, and this represents what we can see in our viewport. So we could click here and type 10, or to get a little visual view, we can use this bar here. I can move this bar, and you can see it's letting me scroll through my timeline. Alternatively, I could come to this little, the end of the bar, both the ends are fine, and I can drag it to scale this bar. Now we can see more of the timeline. And so now that I can see more of the timeline, I'm just going to make my end time go all the way to 10 seconds. A good piece of practice, and you can see this when we got the timeline, is to always make your working range a little longer than the end of your timeline. So if I want a 10-second animation, it makes sense to do 10.5. and have it like this. This is just general working practice. I'm not too sure why. I just know this is how people normally do it. And we see that when Unreal gave us the timeline, it has it go up to negative 0.5 second or 0.5 seconds. So we see a little bit of the end. Same thing. This goes to it starts at 5.5 seconds. So it used to give us just that 0.5 extra. So just good practice to follow that, because again, Unreal is showing us that's what good practice is. That's why it gave it to us like that. So now let's actually use this timeline. Let's start animating something. I'm going to animate a door opening because maybe that's something you guys are all going to do, have a door that opens. I don't have a door model, so I'm just going to use a cube. I could just drag a cube out and place actors. Real quick, if you don't have this place actors, if this wasn't there for you, you can get it by just going to Window and Place Actors, and that should just pop that up. And under shapes, I just dragged a cube in. So I could, scale this cube to kind of vaguely look like a door. But there's a problem here. And that problem is the pivot. The pivot's in the center. So when I rotate this door, it's just rotating around the center. Maybe you have like a glass revolving door where this is okay. But it's not good for this door. I want it to rotate on its end. So let me delete this door. If you do import your own door FBXs, the best way to fix this is take it back into your modeling software and change the pivot there. That is like the correct way to do this. But this is an Unreal Cube. I'm not going to be exporting this. I'm just going to do it in Engine. So all I've done, and I've already done this, I've made a new actor. Let's just open this actor up. And there it came with a default scene root. I have just added a cube to this scene. I have scaled it to look like a door. And I have moved the cube so that its endpoint, where I want the pivot to be, is where the scene root is. And so when I drag this out, you can see that its pivot is on the end. And so when I rotate it, it's rotating along its edge, which is exactly how I want this door to be. So anytime you have an actor and you don't want to quite go back to or you have a mesh and you don't want to quite go back to your modeling software to change its pivot, which I still suggest you do, just make it an actor, leave that default scene root, and then just move your object around so the pivot now becomes the center of this scene root. Okay, so now we have this door. I'm going to scale it up so it's a little more epic feeling. It's a nice big door. And let's move it. And let me copy it and make another door. So we have two doors that are going to swing open. I want them to start closed, and then I want them to swing open like this. Okay, so let's do that. Come back to our sequencer, and now we need to add references to these objects in our sequencer. There's a few ways of doing that. I'm just going to show you two ways. One, we could select the door, come down here where it says add, actor to sequence, and you can see because I have the door selected, it says add BP door. There's also this entire box down here that shows us everything in the level. We can see our BP door 1 and 2 are here. And you could use this also to select it, but as our level gets bigger and bigger and has more objects, this starts to get a little cluttered. So just selecting the object first and coming here will let us select it from here. So I can add that, and you can see now BP door has been added. There's a reference to it. And if we look back at our outliner, there's a new thing that says sequencer. And we can see that sequence door opening. So door opening is the name of my sequence door opening. And so it's telling us which sequencer this object is attached to. The other way I can just add a reference is just click and drag it into our sequencer. So same thing, sequence door opening, it's a part of that sequencer. And so now our sequencer has a reference to both our meshes. Great. We want to animate it. What I specifically want to animate is the rotation. So to do that, first we need to add a track. I can come here next to this little plus button next to BP door where it says track, click plus, and I want to animate its rotation, which is a part of the transform. So let's do that. I'm going to hit the transform, and you can see it adds a new track, and that's a transform, and it contains its location, rotation, scale. We can even open up the location, rotation, scale, and see what it's made of, which is X, Y, Z, roll, pitch, yaw, and X, Y, Z again for the scale. So I can do the exact same thing for door 2, just add a transform path to it. Now to start, let me just animate the rotation, and this part's very simple, very easy. Make sure my playhead's on 0. And next to these names, location, rotation, scale, you can see there's another column here which has 2 arrows and a plus button. This plus button lets us add a new keyframe. So I'm going to add a new keyframe at my rotation, which is 0, 0, 0. And then I'm just going to move the playhead up to something like, let's just say 10 seconds. And I'm going to rotate it to where I want my door to be. Let's just have it open nice and big. And I'm going to add another keyframe. Now when I move my playhead, we can see my door is actually rotating to that. So basically a keyframe, if you aren't already familiar with it, a keyframe is going to set the value. So this keyframe, I've set it to be 0, 0, 0. I've set this last keyframe to be 100 degrees rotated, and Unreal is going to try to smoothly move from one keyframe to another. So if we just take a look at this rotation here as I'm moving this timeline, you can see it's slowly moving towards 100. If I had changed this to something like 80, for example, now when we move upwards, it's slowly going to move towards 80 instead of 100. So when we set keyframes, all Unreal is going to try and do is smoothly move from one keyframe to another best it can. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing with the other door. I'm going to make sure I select it, set its rotation, and then 10 seconds in, I'm going to set its rotation out here. Make sure to add that keyframe. And cool, we can see this is working here. If I was to play our game, you could see that the animation doesn't work. So we need to actually tell Unreal when to play our sequencer. We don't want our cutscenes just playing anytime. We want to be able to have control of that. So same way, we need to tell Unreal when to play our sequencer. I'm just going to move the player a little bit so that we start looking at the doors just to make things a little easier for us later on. And the first thing we need to do, we are going to be using the level blueprint to play our sequencer. And so we need to get a reference to our sequencer in the level blueprint. My sequencer is called sequence door opening, so I'm going to drag it into the level. And you can see it pops up in my outliner, so now I can get a reference to it in the level blueprint. So let's do that. Let's open up our level blueprint. I'm going to dock it. And let's add our sequencer to it. Remember, to add something from the outliner into the level, all we do is drag it on top here and then let go. Perfect. And I'm going to just, when our level starts, I'm going to play our sequencer. To play a sequencer, all you do is use the play function that's on it and plug that up. So now when I compile this and play it, our door opens. That's great. It's going to take 10 seconds. It's going to slowly open up. And when it finishes, we see that it just snaps back closed, which not what we want. So let's fix that first. Let me get out of here. And if, oh, I apologize, my Unreal crashed for no reason, but we're back. So let's try and fix that door opening thing. If I was to open my sequencer back up again, this is just, again, a small quirk in Unreal. Our sequencer, when it's finished playing, it's just going to go back to the start position by default. And that's not something we really want. For this door specifically, I want it to open, and I just want it to stay open. So if you want your thing to just stay where it was when the animation ends, we have to do this for every track that we make. And our transform track, all I need to do is right click on it, go up to properties, and where it says when finished, instead of project default, I'm going to do keep state. Same thing for door 2, properties, when finished, keep state. Now when I run it, the door is going to swing open. It's going to take its good 10 seconds. And we can see it just stays open, which is perfectly and exactly what we want. So just like we animated the rotation, let's just look at the transform track and let's just see ourselves animating the other two things. So with one of them, I'm going to animate the scale real quick. We'll start it at its normal scale, whatever it was. Move it along towards 10 seconds, and I am just going to change the scale and add another keyframe. So now when I move the playhead, you can see that the scale is animating. Cool. Let's try the other door, but let's try this with location now. Same thing, start at 0, set a keyframe. I'm going to do a couple keyframes for location, so let's move it back a bit. Let's add another keyframe. Let's move it to 5 seconds, maybe move it a little over here. Add a keyframe, 8 seconds, it's going to be all the way here maybe. Add a keyframe, and then when the 10 seconds, I want it to be back where it started. So I can just copy this keyframe, come all the way here, and paste it. So now we can see a nice little thing. There's a little path that's visualizing our location, like our translations. And if I was to play this, very weird door opening. Most doors don't open like this, I'm pretty sure. But, you know, we can see that we have not just rotation, but we can also use our location and scale. One other interesting thing with the location specifically, you can see with this spline, with this path that it's created for us, there's these little dots here. These are the keyframes. I can actually click on these and you can see it moves my playhead to that keyframe. So if you start having complex location animations and you don't want to just keep moving your playhead to figure it out, you can just kind of click this and it'll snap to that location. It's just a little convenient. So I don't like this here. I can move it out. And then if I add a keyframe there, it just edits that keyframe. So it's just a convenient feature. Okay, before we stop this video and break it up into parts, right now my sequencer is playing as soon as I hit start. This isn't super convenient for me. I don't want my animation to play when the game begins. I actually want the player to trigger my animation. Let's just do that. So instead of triggering it on begin play, I'm going to use a collision event. So I can add a collider directly to the level. It's called a trigger box. You can see it in basic. It's right there, trigger box. So let's add a trigger box, and let's change its size so that it's something we know the player has to enter, because it's too big for them not to enter. And just for our own sake, I'm going to change this trigger box as hidden in game to false so that we can see it in the game, just for testing. And now we need to actually use this trigger box to run an overlap event, and we're going to play the sequence on that overlap event. So I'm going to open up level blueprint. And let's get rid of this begin play. I don't want to trigger it on begin play. So we learned one way of adding a reference is like this, but I don't want to use the trigger box as a reference. I actually just want to use that on overlap event that it has. So instead, another way we can add this reference into the level is make sure trigger box is selected. Let's go back to our blueprint. We just right click, and you see it says create a reference to trigger box, but above that it says add event for trigger box. We drop that down, there's a collision, drop that down, and we can say add on actor begin overlap. So let's add that. So we want to play our animation only if it's the player colliding with the object, not anything. So just like we've done like 5 times already now, let's check if the actor has a tag. I want to make sure that tag is player. And if and only if it's player, do I want to run my sequence. So let's just take a look at this in action. I walk into trigger box, it runs. And it runs once. If I walk into the trigger box again, we can see it plays all the way from the beginning. So instead of doing that, when we leave the trigger box, let's just have it play backwards. So for a simple door that opens and closes, this might make sense. You know, when you go near the door, we can have it open. When the player leaves that door area, we can have the door start closing again. It's going to look nice for a door, but it's not going to make sense for your cutscene, so you might not want it there. But let's just take a look at it anyway. So on begin overlap, we want to run the sequencer forwards. We want the door to open. And just similarly, the opposite, on end overlap, I want to run the sequencer backwards. So I'm just going to copy everything here. But instead of running play, I'm going to run play reverse, which is the exact same thing as play, but instead it's going to play it backwards. And now you can see when I run this, I go in here, our door is opening, but if I leave, it plays backwards and our door closes. So whatever animation we has, it plays backwards. There are uses for this again, maybe not for a cutscene. You wouldn't want your cutscene just playing in reverse, but for something like a door, or maybe when you enter an area, a light bulb dims, and when they leave the area, the light bulb is bright again, something like that. This becomes useful. And again, it's just something that's good to know. So I'm going to stop this video here, and this will be part 1 of our sequencer series. We are going to go over a few more things in sequencer. We talked about lights just now. Let's look at how we can animate lights in sequencer. Let's look at how we can animate visibility in sequencer, how we can play particles, play audio. We're going to look at how we can do nice curved tracks in sequencer. And finally, we're also going to look at how we can use our own camera in sequencer. Right now, it's our player looking at this door open, but if you think about cutscenes in games, there's a camera that's being controlled that moves all cinematic-like. Let's do that as well. But that's part 1. Thank you for watching.